Welcome to Jeff Art Design's presentation on creating a cremation urn. Each of the succeeding slides will have a text panel on the left side of the screen. I will be reading these panels as a narration so you don't have to read along. However, if you want to refer to the information, you can pause the video and read it. As with any project, you first need to design it. The general shape of the urn here is sketched. Wood species are selected and layout of ring layers is planned. Calculations are made to determine the necessary volume of the urn and the capacity of each layer. The rule of thumb for urn volume is to allow 1 cubic inch for each pound that the deceased weighed. The urns are constructed by stacking layers of rings. The rings are constructed by gluing trapezoidal pieces end to end to form a ring. The number of pieces is determined by the desired appearance of the final outer surface of the urn. More pieces result in a finer grain appearance with more face grain and less end grain character at the joints between two pieces. Making a ring from fewer pieces results in less work required in manufacture of the ring, but results in a coarser end grain appearance at the segment joints. To create the finer appearance mentioned above, ring sections for this urn are composed of 12 pieces. After the individual segments are cut, pairs of segments are butt glued together and secured with tape until the glue has set. Care must be taken at this step to ensure that the pieces are flush with each other at the bottom of the joint. It is important that the bottom of the ring be as flat as possible with no raised edges between adjoining segments. After the glue has set in step 1, the segment pairs are glued together to form two half circles. The two halves are then loosely mated to observe how closely they meet to form a tight joint for the final assembly into a ring. Adjustments are made to the mating segments with a spindle sander to ensure that they have a tight joint. It is helpful to hold them up to a light to see where fine adjustments are necessary. After adjustments are made to ensure a tight joint, the ring halves are glued together to form the completed ring section. This process is repeated for each ring layer. It is helpful to stack the rings in the order that they will be shaped for the final urn. After the ring blanks are created, the top and bottom are created next. The top, lid, and the bottom, floor of the urn are each made from 12 triangular pieces that will be edge glued together to form rounds. One round will form the lid of the urn and one round will form the floor. They are assembled the same way as the rings by making two halves that are then adjusted for a final fit to form the round. The round is then glued to the faceplate of the lathe and turned to form the shapes for the top and bottom. We are now ready to start assembling and shaping the urn. The base for the urn is the first body section that is turned. The base ring is glued to a faceplate and the ring is turned to its nearly completed shape. Final turning will be completed after the urn is fully assembled. A recessed channel is turned on the inside of the ring to create a ledge that will support the floor of the urn. We have previously turned the floor to its proper diameter and flattened the face of it. The rough turned floor is now glued in place with the flattened face in the base channel. After the glue has cured, the floor is turned to be even with the top edge of the base ring. This surface is turned to be flat and level so that it mates tightly with the bottom of the next ring in the series, which will be glued in place on top of this portion. That is why it was important to make sure that the bottom glue joints on the rings were flush when they were assembled, so they would mate tightly with the turned ring at this point in the process. The second ring is now glued in place on top of the base section. This ring is rotated so that the segment joints line up with the middle of the segment below it. This creates a more pleasing appearance in the face of the urn and assures a more secure joint between segments and layers. After the glue has cured overnight, this ring will be rough shaped inside and out to remove the points and flats on the ring, begin the rounding and flaring process, and create balance for when the urn is turning at high speed on the lathe. The top of the ring will be turned level to match with the flat bottom of the next ring. Approximately 1/2 of the ring material will be removed at this step. One cherry accent ring, as shown in the original sketch, is added at this stage. It is glued to the second ring while the assembly is still glued to the faceplate. It is rough turned in the same manner as the previous ring. The fourth ring will now be added to the assembly. The faceplate has been removed from the lathe for ease of gluing. After the glue has cured, it will be returned to the lathe and ring 4 will be rough turned to begin shaping the urn for the flared center portion. A steady rest is placed on the lathe to support the weight of the urn as the urn develops depth and gains mass. The steady rest prevents excess vibration which occurs as the mass of the urn increases. At this point, assembly of the bottom half of the urn is complete. Final shaping and sanding of the inside and outside will be done at this stage. A shallow recessed ring is turned into the top edge of the fourth ring. This ring will assist in centering the matching halves when the top half is completed. The bottom half assembly is left on the faceplate and removed from the lathe. A second faceplate is now placed on the lathe and assembly of the top half of the urn begins. This half will be built in reverse order with the top of the top ring, ring 7, being glued to the faceplate and the bottom of ring 7 facing outward. This ring will be rough turned. The final ring of this top half assembly, ring 5, will have a complementary ring turned into the bottom of it to match with the centering ring turned into the top of ring 4. Ring 6 is the cherry accent ring for the top half. It is glued to the preceding ring 7, which has been rough turned and flattened to match the flat face of this ring. This ring will then be rough shaped and flattened to match with ring 5, which will be added next. Ring 5 is added, shaped, and leveled. The centering ring mentioned in conjunction with ring 4 is added to this ring. At this point, final shaping and sanding of the inside and outside of the top half is accomplished. The top half assembly is removed from this faceplate. We are now ready to assemble the final urn shape. The top half is glued to the bottom half, which is still attached to its faceplate. The final assembly is placed back on the lathe and the steady rest is added. The joint between the two halves is turned both inside and out to ensure a smooth matching joint. Final sanding is accomplished. At this point, a shallow locking groove is turned on the inside of the top section, 3/16 of an inch below the top inside lip. The locking groove is shown here. This groove is 3/16 of an inch wide and 3/16 of an inch deep. It acts as a channel to lock the lid in place. 4 notches are cut through the top edge of this groove to allow for locking pegs in the lid to slip into the locking groove. The lid is dropped in place and then rotated slightly to align the joints in the lid properly with the joint pattern of the rings in the urn body. A decorative finial is now turned to be placed in the center of the completed lid. Thank you for viewing this presentation. You can see more of my work at Jeff Art Designs on Facebook.